This is Jets Chaos, and the Jets are interviewing the world. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that is at some point, after you interview so many people, it feels like they could have had, basically, they could have had an open ended interview. They could have said, hey, we're interviewing for a GM and a head coach. We're talking to a lot of people. I mean, you could be a guy who got fired from one coaching job in college and had a losing record in college, after getting fired for jumping over a staff room table and attacking another coach in the film room. No problem. Come on in. Hey, you had a good year as a defensive coordinator. You were a college coach with a losing record. No problem. We're your guys. Now, what's really going on? If you ask me, my opinion of what's really going on is when you have this consulting group. This consulting group is all about connections. It's all about meeting people. It's all about favors and handshake. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not. I'm not saying that this is at all corruption or bad or not. Off the up and up. It's just the reality of the way the business world works. They Part of what they're doing is they're seeking out and finding people, different characters that they think are future potential to do things in the coaching world or the GM world. And some of them are almost like just, it's kind of like a give back. Corporations do it all the time. It's not just in the NFL. So what I'm saying is not foreign to any major company or big corporation. There are plenty of times where, because the NFL is one big family, it is one big thing under one commissioner. There is an entity called the NFL. And sometimes in this, just like any other corporation, people are brought in for interviews that aren't really serious candidates. Like I work for a public charter school system. And when they interviewed for principals and assistant principals and all kinds of positions, teachers would come in and interview for principal. So you'd have a 6-year teacher, no leadership experience. All they've done is taught. I was, fifth grade teacher, 6 years, interviewing for a principal spot. No one really expected that person to get the job, typically, unless it was a very special teacher. But typically, what that was the teacher was establishing that they were interested in a future career in leadership, in coaching, and being a leader. And what would happen is the interview was experience. It was showing them during the interview, they would learn what they needed to do, what they needed to know. The feedback of afterwards would tell them, these are the things you need to do in your career to eventually get there. And it's kind of like a giving back kind of thing. It's just something that's done in industry. It's. I know people are saying, but we're not a charity. That's not our job. It's just done. It's just an industry thing. It's the way to build up the industry. It's to take future leaders, take future people that might not be qualified in this moment, but give them the opportunities. Plus, it's a way to build connections. You interview this guy now when nobody knows who he is, and a few years from now, a couple of years from now, suddenly, all of a sudden, he has the credentials to be a really good position coach or a defensive coordinator or an offensive coordinator, and suddenly you have a relationship with that person because you interviewed them a while back. Remember, we interviewed you and we gave you great feedback and how to move forward in your career, and through that connection, who knows? Maybe that person ends up having a job in the organization. There are people we're interviewing that may end up having jobs. They might come in as position coaches. But this is just a way that some people make it known that they are interested in future positions. And sometimes we reach for higher positions than we're ready for, but it's a good experience. And it's just a thing a lot of corporations, a lot of organizations just do. It's kind of like a scale it down. Lawyers have a scale down pricing for some clients who can't afford good lawyers, but as a way to give back, they take on some clients that normally wouldn't be able to afford their services. We do it in therapy. Therapists will have scale down pricing, and therapists will take on a certain amount of clients that really can't afford therapy. It's a way of giving back. It happens in every industry. So that's how I interpret some of these interviews. Some of these interviews aren't serious, but they're not doing a disservice to the person they're interviewing. They're not. They're giving that person the experience. People are thinking, "Oh, it's horrible. Why would you interview them? Why would they sell out and waste their time? No, don't they know they're being used? Don't they know that they don't have a realistic chance?" That's not what's happening. They're gaining experience. They're learning the process. They're learning what it takes, and it's part of the growth. It's individual growth. I went on many interviews for jobs that I had no qualification for before I actually ended up getting jobs of those levels later on in my career. But it's a great thing to do. It's a great way it's a great thing for the organization to do. And again, if you're saying what's in it for the Jets, relationships. It doesn't hurt to build these relationships. It does not hurt. So, yeah, you're going to see some people come in that obviously would make no sense to hire. They're not, unless the Jets pulled a freaking. I mean, it's the Jets, but but more than likely, there is a real there's probably two to three candidates that we're very serious about. You have to have backups. You can't have one and say this is the only one. Now, it does seem that our worst case scenario, well, some people might say it's our best case, but I'm just saying, even if everybody turned us down, if the Jets didn't want him as their first pick, the reality is, and I'm sure he's high on the list and he's in there in the priority list somewhere, is that we know Aaron Glenn. At least the rumors say, if there's any truth to it, and I believe it, I get a sense that there's not really a lie. We know that Aaron Glenn, or it really feels like, or have a good idea that he really wants this job, which is an incredible thing, considering every team is interviewing him, talking to him. I think it's been pretty clear, and there's been signs and kind of whispers that Aaron Glenn has always wanted the Jets coaching job, that this was the goal for him. This is what he wanted. That, even if he's not number one on my list, that is a ton of points for me, right? A guy who's not just taking any head coaching. I'll admit it. First assistant principal job, I didn't care. Why do you want to work for this school? What a joke. It could have been the worst school in the world. When I wanted that promotion from teacher to assistant principal, I'd say anything to get hired. Oh, I love this school. I love the way you run this school. I love this community. You'll say anything, right? So to not have a guy who's just saying anything, but a guy who genuinely has other opportunities, a guy who's going to be offered a head coaching position. The worst case scenario is next year, right? But almost guaranteed even this year. For him to publicly, while there's choices, while there's other teams interviewing him, for it to get out, or for there to be this sense that he would pick us over everybody else, that's worth points to me. I am not one of these guys who has my favorite and everybody else is trash and it's ridiculous and I'm going to be pissed. No. There are a bunch of candidates out there that all could be good candidates for us. And we won't know until they're hired and they either fail or succeed. Aaron Glenn is definitely on my positive list, on the list of this would be something. I think there would be something to be excited about. I think he brings things to the table that I would be excited about. He's obviously had success. He's been with a team that's doing what we're trying to do. They've been the joke organization, turned around into a great organization. He's a disciplinarian. He's strong. He's not going to get walked on by the players. It's going to be his way or the highway. There's attributes we like with him. I'm not going to sit there and talk about the guys I like better or worse, because if I talk about better or worse, it leads to nothing but bickering and crying and people being babies. And why don't you like the same guy as me, and why don't we have the same exact list? And I'm just too grown up for this discussion. I'm just going to talk about people I like and what the positives are. But I'm not saying that means they're the best candidate. I'm just saying they have attributes that I like, right? So aside from Aaron Glenn, we're not talking to Mike McCarthy. Obviously, he's not interested. It's too bad. He'd be an interesting candidate. 12-5, 3 years in a row. I love it when people complain about their playoff record. You know what I mean? Like, you know what? Maybe he has a bad playoff record because in those 12-5 seasons, Prescott was an overrated quarterback, and he's such a good coach that he brought a team that really wasn't as talented and as good as everybody thought they were to that situation to be in the playoffs. But maybe when you get to the playoffs, you're playing other good coaches and other good teams. And if you're one of those coaches that get more out of their players and more out of the team than an average coach would, then you face a situation where now you're facing a good coach and good players and you get outplayed and you can't outcoach another good coach. But if you give him more talent and you gave him better surrounding, he gets the most out of his players, and that's what you want out of a coach. So that's why I like McCarthy. Is he just wins everywhere he goes. His overall coaching record is really really strong. And if people say, well, that's because he had good quarterbacks or good teams around him, fine. We had a good roster, so we thought. I think that if you looked at the biggest problem with our roster right now, the most obvious thing is they're not well coached. So Mike McCarthy, come on down, right? So Aaron Glenn, check. Mike McCarthy, check. Brian Flores, check. I'm not going to argue with people on that one. The reason it's a check is because he took over a team that was supposed to win 0 games and won 5 games. And then he went and improved each year. And no, it's not lowering standards like people say to say, oh, so you're going to lower your standards because with the Jets. No, I'm looking at reality. We haven't been able to find a coach that's coached this team for 3 years and been better in their third year than their first years since who? Parcells? I mean, like what Brian Flores did for Miami. Name another coach. Name the coach that did that for the Jets. How many coaches have we had in our history that came in while we're shit, had that first year where we're a shitty team, like Miami did, 5 wins, and then the next year get 9 wins, and the next year get 10 wins. So their third year coaching our team, they're still projecting upwards. I kind of want to know what would have happened with Brian Flores if he was never fired, and what would have happened with the Dolphins. Actually, I kind of don't want to know because it scares me because I think the Dolphins were ready to be a playoff team with Brian Flores, and I think it backfired, and now it's all blowing up in their face with this guy McDaniels. They were on a great trajectory with Brian Flores. They were getting better every year, and they didn't even have a great roster. He was literally doing it because he might be that guy on the Belichick tree that really is the guy. Again, he's not necessarily, I'm going to cry or scream if we don't hire him, and I think there's other good candidates, but he goes to my positive side. There are things I like about him. Does he have to learn how to not rub people the wrong way, and can he be that distant from his other coaches? Yes. He has to learn not to do that. He has to learn not to be so abrasive to his own players. Like, he made mistakes, but he also apologized, and he said he was sorry, and that he said he learns. And he also went on to do really well in the following jobs that he's had, and he's been really good. Anybody that wants to cross them off the list because of the performance of the Vikings in that last game or couple of games, it's ridiculous. Look at the roster. Look at the defensive players on the Vikings defense. Where's their dominant edge rusher? In today's NFL, how did they do anything this year without a dominant edge rusher? Where's their CB1? Where's their defensive tackle stud? Like, look at the entire 11 starting guys for the Minnesota Vikings and tell me they didn't completely overperform with Brian Flores. I mean, so again, he goes to my positive side. Let me say hello to some people in the chat. Knobcraft is here. Hey, man, I love it when I put the camera on and go live and see you in the chat. So there, we're equal. Jojo Townsell, what's out? What's up? It's out of control. Maybe. But again, I don't think it's that real. Jake is agreeing that, and how you doing, Jake? He's saying that Dak sucks. I don't know if Dak sucks. I think Dak is just one of those he's just one of those 28 touchdown, 10 interception, 3,800 to 4,200 yard quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, they all fall into that category, even the guys that stink. Right? Like, now bad quarterbacks have 3,600 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 10 interceptions. You can look at Bo Nix, Caleb Williams. They're all the same. You look at everybody's numbers, they're the same. You have to look at your eyes to know if they're good. And people are using the numbers to say they're the same. They're saying, why are people saying Caleb Williams is bad and Jaden Daniels is good? Because you can't just look at the numbers. Because that's what's called a box score person. A box score person doesn't know nothing. Because you got to watch with your eyes. You got to watch its situation, right? So Aaron Rodgers, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels. We're putting Aaron Rodgers with the rookies. But all their numbers look similar. They're all somewhere in the mid to high 20s in touchdowns. They're all somewhere between 8 and 12 interceptions. And they're all somewhere between 35 and 4,500 yards, right? And a lot of it depends on how many times they pass the ball, right? Like what scheme they're in, what system they're in. So that's what Dak Prescott falls into. He gets a lot of yards, but again, they throw the ball a lot. And he's had, over his career when he's healthy and CeeDee Lamb is healthy, and he had Cooper for a bunch of years with CeeDee Lamb. He's had good targets to throw to. Not a good running game. They haven't been great at running. They've had some guys get hurt on and off, but I mean, but it's been a while since it's not like they've had, some Henry or any kind of special running back. So yeah, Dak's numbers look good, but I agree with you. I don't think he sucks, but I don't think he's anything. I think there's just a lot of meh quarterbacks, just a lot of middle tier quarterbacks in the NFL. Like a lot of guys that if you put the right team around them, there's a chance that they could win. They're all capable of winning and going pretty high with your team. They're good enough to do that, but they're not the guys that carry you. They're not the Mahomes. They're not the Josh Allen who hasn't proved it yet, but I'm going to put him up there because I think he's a fantastic quarterback. Um, they're not the Lamar Jackson. They're not the going back to the Peyton Manning. Oh my God, the Tom Brady. Oh my God, like the Aaron Rodgers in his prime. Like none of them are those guys, right? They're not that elite tier, and that's why every year sometimes they're in the top 10 for a little bit, and oh, this quarterback's good, and then the next year they're number 15. I mean, there's just whole mid section of quarterbacks, which is why we have to temper our expectations for quarterbacks. There aren't that many good ones. Anyway, I gotta go. People are home. And I just wanted to say what's up and what's going on with the coaching search. Don't panic. It's not too many guys. We're just doing some favors in the industry. We're just checking all the boxes. We'll hire one of the top guys we're all talking